Hey you, and welcome to lesson 25. Today we will talk about subject question and object question and how to form correct object and subject questions and what is the difference. We'll also talk about used to and would and present simple to talk about things in the past that are no longer true, and we will talk about each and every what is the difference between both and how to use them. We'll also cover word stress, mainly for two-syllable nouns, adjectives, and verbs. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Hey, welcome to lesson 25. Today, we are going to talk about subject and object questions. So, what is subject and object questions? Basically, you have, in a sentence, you have a subject and you have an object. If you want to make a question, you will either ask about the subject or you will either ask about the object, right? So we know from past experience that with questions and negatives, if we have a verb in the sentence, questions and negatives we will use the auxiliary do, does, or did, depending on the sentence, if it's present or past simple, right? So there is an exception to this rule. If we are making subject questions, we don't use auxiliaries, even if there is a verb in the sentence. So if we're making a question about the subject, we skip the auxiliaries. We don't use do, does, or did. But if we are making the question about the object of the sentence, then we will use the auxiliaries do, does, or did. Okay, let's take a look at a simple sentence and make some questions. So the first sentence is John broke a window. You know, John always breaking things, so he broke a window this time. So there are two possibilities that we can ask about. First, we can ask about the object that was broken, and we can ask about the person who broke that object, right? So let's take a look. If we make a question that the answer will be the window, if we make a question about this window, we will say, what did John break? What did John break? Now notice, we use the auxiliary did because it is an object question. We are making a question about the object, which is the window. Now, let's say we don't want to ask about the object, but we want to ask about the subject. We want to know about the person that broke the window. We will say, who broke the window? Who broke the window? Notice there is no auxiliary here. We didn't use do, did, or does because we are making a subject question. So keep in mind, when you are asking about the object, you'd use the auxiliary. When you're asking about the subject, you do not use the auxiliary. Now, let's take a look at another sentence. Jack likes ice cream. Jack likes ice cream. So just like before, we can make a question about the object, which is ice cream, and we can say, what does Jack like? What, let's write it here. Damn, that's too big. All right, 1 second. What does Jack like? Okay, notice we use does because, where is it? I lost Jack. We'll find Jack, don't worry. Don't worry, we'll find Jack. All right, hold on, let me close this. Okay, so does because it's present simple. You see, likes is a present simple verb. That's why we must use does in the question. All right? Now, we didn't say likes here. We said like because we have the auxiliary does. And you know when we have does, we always use the base form of the verb. So what does Jack like? We use an auxiliary because we are asking about the ice cream, which is the answer here. Jack likes ice cream. Now let's say we want to ask about the subject and not the object. Okay, we want a question that the answer will be Jack. So we will be, who likes ice cream? Who likes ice cream? Who likes ice cream? Again, we use likes because it's a present simple. Who likes ice cream? And the answer to this question will be Jack. And as you notice, there is no auxiliary. All right, so I hope that was clear. Let's take a look at subject and object questions. So yeah, we already covered this. What does Jack like? Jack likes ice cream. And who likes ice cream? Jack likes ice cream. Okay, let's take a look at another one here, and that is who. My sister writes short stories, right? My sister writes short stories. So if the question is about short stories, it will be what does my sister writes? What does my sister write? So what does my sister write? We are asking about short stories, which is the object. But if we are asking about my sister, who is the subject, will be who writes short stories. The answer to this will be my sister, or my sister writes short stories. Let's take another example. Mary keeps a pig in the yard. So Mary is the subject, the pig is the object. So if we ask him a question, the answer to will be Mary, then we will say, who keeps a pig in the yard? Who keeps a pig in the yard? If you want to ask a question that the answer to will be a pig, then we will use auxiliary does because it's present simple, and this will become what does Mary keep in the yard, and then the answer will be a pig. All right, so let's move on and talk about used to versus would. Used to, it refers to past actions, right? Something we don't do anymore. Do you know how to talk about past habits using used to and would? We covered used to before. Okay, we said before that if we use used to in the sentence, that we no longer, this statement or this sentence is no longer true. It used to happen in the past. It means it was true at one point in the past, but currently now it is not true anymore. Okay, so let's say they used to live in London. That means they don't live in London anymore. I didn't used to like olives. That means I do like olives now. Okay, we would always go to the seaside for our holidays, but one holiday we went to the mountains instead. Now here we use would. Okay, also to talk about the past, like something we would always do or we used to do. So when we talk about things in the past that are not true anymore, we can do it in different way. We can say used to plus infinitive. We used to live in New York when I was a kid. That means we don't now. There didn't used to be a market here. When did it open? That means now there is a market here, a supermarket here. Notice when we have auxiliary, did or don't or doesn't or didn't, any do auxiliary, the verb will always be infinitive. So the used will become used. We will remove the D because it's the infinitive form or the base form of the verb of used is use. So there will be no D. All right. Didn't you used to have a garden? Didn't you used to have a garden? It means in the past you had a garden, but what happened? I don't see the garden here anymore. Okay, again, use became the base form of the verb because we have didn't. Okay, now we can also use used to talk about past habits, repeated past actions that do not happen anymore. Like I used to go swimming every Tuesday or every Thursday. She used to smoke, but now she quit. All right, now let's take a look at would. We can use would to talk about repeated past actions that don't happen anymore. Okay, every Sunday I would go on a long bike ride, but that means that I don't do that anymore. My dad would read me amazing stories every night at bedtime. Would for past habits is slightly more formal than used to. So basically the difference between used to and would is formality. Used to is more conversational, and would is more formal. Right? It is often used in stories. We don't normally use the negative or question form of you or would for past habits. Note that we can't usually use would to talk about past states. Okay, let's take a look at some example. We went to the same beach every year. Okay, so here we use the past simple to talk about past habits. The past simple doesn't emphasize the repeated or continuous nature of the action. So the main, so we can always use the past simple as an alternative to used to and would, but we will not be emphasizing the repeated or continuous nature of the action. So we went to the same beach every summer. We went to the same beach every summer. So the past simple does not make it so clear that things is no longer true. So maybe we still go to that beach. We went to that beach every summer, and sometimes we still go to the beach. It doesn't make it clear that the action ended. We used to go to the same beach every summer. We went to the same beach every summer. We would go to the beach every summer. So in the second and the third example, you know that these no longer happen in the past. But if you use the past simple to describe the same sentence, it's not clear if it's no longer true. Now let's take a look at the main differences between would and used to. There are two main differences between would and used to. The first rule in using would is we cannot just use would in a sentence unless it's been established that this sentence is taking place in the past. This doesn't apply for used to. We can just use used to. So the main difference between used to and would, we cannot use would until the past is established in the sentence. Let's take a look at an example. I used to watch cartoons every Saturday morning when I was little. I used to watch cartoons every Saturday morning I was little. This is perfectly fine, but if we replace used to with I would watch, then it is wrong. I would watch cartoons every Saturday morning when I was little cannot be used that way, right? Because there hasn't been a past time frame established in the sentence. So if I want to make this sentence correct, I'd have to say when I was little, now I established that this is in the past, then I can use would. I would get up and watch cartoons every Saturday morning. Now it's correct. So we cannot use would until the past is established. This doesn't apply to used to because we can just use used to right away. That's why used to is much more common to describe past habits. Now the second rule is that we cannot use would with stative verbs, right? The second difference between used to and would is that would is not used to with stative verbs. Now stative verbs are verbs that don't come in the ing form. They don't come in the active form or the continuous form. It's very rare. Those are emotional verbs, senses verbs. We've covered them before. All right, let's take a look at some example. When I was a student, I used to love sleeping late on the weekends. When I was a student, I would love sleeping late on the weekend. This is wrong. So this one is correct. This one is wrong. Next, to summarize, the use of would is more restricted than the use of used to. Okay, so would it has way more rules. You know, you cannot use them with stative verbs. You cannot use them, unless the past simple is established. So there are a lot more restrictions. That's why it's very less common to use would and is much more common to use used to. Okay, so let's take a look at each and every, and let's take a look at how similar or different they are. Each and every are both determiners. Okay, they are used with singular nouns to indicate quantity, so they are determiners, quantifiers. Each and every are similar in meaning, but they are not always interchangeable. That means we cannot just put each and every in the same sentences. Some sentences can only be used with each. Okay, let's take a look at some rules now. Each expresses the idea of one by one, or individuality. It means each person or each individual on its own. Okay, each can be used for two or more things, or two or more people. First example, each employee received an invitation. Each employee received an invitation. Each refugee received food and water. Each refugee received food and water. Only each, not every, can be used with just two things. Like for example, if we only have two things, we don't use each. We don't use every. But each can be used for two things or more. So for example, he carried a book in each hand. He carried the book in each hand. You cannot say he carried the book in every hand, because he only has two hands, and therefore you cannot use every. Each can be followed by of. A letter was sent to each of the firemen. The actor replied to each of his fans. A meal was served to each of the passengers. Another rule for each, and not every, is that it can be used as a pronoun. Every cannot be used as a pronoun. The prize money was divided among the team members. Each received 10,000 euros. Okay, each received. So each here is used as a pronoun. And you know, each could be an indefinite pronoun, which is always singular, as we have covered previously. Okay, now let's take a look at every. Every refers to all members of or a complete group. So every means everybody, everyone, all the members, or the whole group. Okay, every. Indicates three or more things or people. So we cannot use every for two. We can only use every if we have three or more. Let's take a look at some examples. Every pupil must wear a uniform. Every pupil must wear a uniform. That means you have more than three. Every book borrowed must be returned. Every employee received a free copy. Okay, another use of every is every used to say how often something happened. Okay, so we use it to indicate how often something happens. There is a train every 5 minutes. The church bell rings every hour. A new bulletin is published every morning. We use every with abstract nouns. They have every reason to be satisfied. Every weakness is noticed. Every skill is precious. Every is used with adverbs, almost, nearly, practically, and so on. Nearly every student passed the test. Almost every member answered the questionnaire. Practically every house today is connected to the internet. All right, now let's take a look at word stress. To communicate clearly, when you are speaking in English, it is important to use the correct stress. Stress of the first syllable. Okay, most of the two-syllable nouns, we stress the first two syllables, like climate, knowledge. We stress the first two syllables. Most of the two-syllable adjectives, we we stress the first part of the adjectives, like flippant, spacious. Stress of the last syllable. Most two-syllable verbs, we stress the last part of the verb, like require, decide. Stress of the second to the last syllable of. Words that end in IC. Example, ecstatic. We put the stress in the middle. Geographic, geographic, ecstatic. There are two very simple rules about word stress. So we have two rules, which we are going to cover in a minute. One word has only one stress. One word cannot have two stresses. Okay, so each word has one stress. It cannot have more than one stress. It's true that there can be a secondary stress in some words, but the secondary stress is much smaller because it's not the main stress. Primarily, stress is the one that is longer and more, we put more stress onto it. We can only stress vowels and not consonants. So the rules here is each word has one main stress and only vowels are stressed and not consonants. Let's take a look at this table. Most two-syllable nouns: present, export, China, trade. So the emphasis are on the first part of the word. Most two-syllable adjective: present, slender, clever, happy. Now, for most two-syllable verbs, the stress are on the last part of the verb, like decide or require. Okay, so basically what you must remember is that most two-syllable adjectives and nouns, the stress are in the first part of the word. Most two-syllable verbs, the stress is in the end part of the verb. So verbs are like present, export, decide, begin. Now, if this was, I'm using the wrong tool. All right. Now, if this is present, it's a verb. Now, this word could be also a noun, but if you read it as a noun, the pronunciation will be completely different, and this will be present, present. Notice, now the stress is in the first part of the word. Present, it's a noun. But if we read it as a verb, then it will be present, 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 present. All right, that's why stress is very important. So this will be it for today, guys. Have a good one.